Hey folks, welcome to Deep Dive Dispatch, the podcast where we don't just scratch the surface. We dig deep into the political landscapes that shape our world today. I'm excited to introduce your guides on this journey through history and headlines, John Matthews and his insightful co-host, Sarah Collins. Together, they'll peel back the layers of complex political issues, offering a slightly conservative viewpoint while staying rooted in facts and historical context. So, buckle up for a thought-provoking ride as we dive into the stories behind the stories. This is Deep Dive Dispatch. Let's get started.
All right, buckle up everybody, because today we are diving deep into media bias, but not just, the typical left versus right stuff.
Right. We are going way deeper.
We're talking about all those sneaky gaslighting tactics.
Exactly. And how money, power, and even how a story is framed can shape what we see and hear every single day.
So, how do we even know what's real anymore, right?
It's not what we're here to figure out. We've got academic studies.
Oh, yeah.
Investigative journalism.
Easy.
Even court documents to help us unpack this whole thing.
Ooh, court documents. Those are always fun. Okay, so think of this as your crash course in media literacy.
Yes.
We're giving you the tools to spot the BS.
Become a more critical media consumer.
Exactly. And we've got some juicy examples to get us started. Remember that whole thing a while back about 97% of journalists donating to Democrats?
Oh, yeah, that was a wild one.
The congressman threw that out there. And it turns out it was based on donations to specific candidates, not overall political giving.
Yeah, Ballotpedia actually did a fact check on that. And while that specific claim was misleading, it does highlight how easily narratives can be twisted. And it does make you wonder about those potential leanings.
Yeah, totally.
The Ballotpedia piece actually dives into several analyses of journalist donations.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One from opensecrets.org found that journalists and media professionals were donating frequently to federal candidates.
Interesting.
Even back in 2010.
So this isn't a new thing?
No, not at all.
Okay, so we're not saying that donating to a certain candidate automatically equals biased reporting.
Right.
But it's something to think about, right?
Absolutely. It's a factor. But we also need to consider the culture within newsrooms, the pressure to get those clicks and views.
Oh, yeah. Clicks and views are king these days.
Absolutely. And of course, who's signing those paychecks? You can't ignore that.
Speaking of paychecks, are you ready for this? Just 15 billionaires own a massive chunk of American news outlets.
Yeah. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Bloomberg.
Bezos. Murdoch.
Even Carlos Slim Helu, with his stake in the New York Times.
It's kind of scary, right? Like, do these individuals impact what gets reported?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How much sway do they have?
Yeah.
And what are their motivations?
Right, because their motivations might not align with, the public interest.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what stories aren't being told.
That's a whole other deep dive right there.
Okay, so we've got these billionaires controlling the media. We've got potential bias from journalists.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole gaslighting thing on top of it all.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like they're messing with our minds.
Think of it less like outright lying and more like strategically distorting reality.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it.
It makes you question your own perceptions. Am I going crazy?
Yeah, exactly.
And the goal, ultimately, is to control the narrative. Control the story.
Control what we think.
Exactly. And it can be so subtle that we don't even realize it's happening. That's what makes it so powerful. It's so sneaky. This article, What is Media Gaslighting? Use the example of celebrity gossip.
Oh, right.
Like Britney Spears or Lindsay Lohan. The media painted this very specific picture of their struggles.
Often portraying them as, troubled. And that narrative, whether it's accurate or not, really shapes public perception.
Yeah.
It shows how gaslighting can impact individuals on a massive scale.
And it's not just celebrities.
Definitely not.
Think about the coverage of President Biden potentially not seeking re-election.
Oh, yeah. That was interesting.
This article, The Legacy Media's Gaslighting of America, really breaks down how that narrative shifted over time.
It was fascinating to watch that unfold.
Early signs of cognitive decline were downplayed, dismissed even.
Right. It was nothing. And the article shows how tactics like vague language and shifting information over time can be used to steer the conversation, to steer public opinion.
It's like they're playing with the timeline. They present things in a certain order to make you think a certain way. Another article I read, Recognize Gaslighting and Sane Washing, talked about using these uncross-referencable facts.
Ooh, yeah. Things you can't easily check.
It's like a hall of mirrors. You don't know which way is up.
Exactly. These tactics are meant to disorient you, to make you doubt yourself, and that's why it's so important to be aware of them.
Okay, so we've got billionaire ownership, we've got potentially biased sources, and now this whole gaslighting thing. It's a lot to process.
It is. It's a lot, but that's why we're here.
But, like, how do we actually spot these tactics in action? How do we become media detectives?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? We need to develop that critical eye, that sixth sense for BS, sharpen those critical thinking skills, and get ready to examine the evidence.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is. It is. Buckle up.
Hey everyone, just taking a moment to send a huge shout out to all of you tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. Your support really keeps us going. And if you're enjoying the deep dives and want to help us continue bringing you these thought-provoking discussions, head over to deepdivedispatch.com. It's an awesome way to support the show and keep the conversation alive. Big thanks for being part of our community. Now, let's jump back into the next part of our episode and keep unraveling these intriguing topics. Enjoy.
So we're back and ready to keep digging into this whole media bias thing.
Yeah, it's like we're peeling back the layers of the onion here.
And you know what they say about onions?
They make you cry.
Sometimes, yeah. But they can also add a lot of flavor. And that's what we're trying to do here, add some flavor to the news.
Right, because we need to be able to taste the BS.
Right, exactly. We need to develop that palate for discerning what's real and what's not. And that starts with becoming more critical consumers of media.
So how do we do that? Give us the secret sauce.
Well, one of the best tools you have is simply being a critical reader. Question everything. Don't just passively scroll and absorb. Ask yourself, who wrote this? What's their angle?
Right, because everyone has an angle, right?
Everyone. And what information might be missing? What are they not telling me?
It's like fact-checking in real time, like while you're reading an article.
Exactly.
One thing I learned from that source, 6 fake news techniques, is to watch out for emotional manipulation. If an article is designed to make you really angry or afraid, that's a red flag.
Yeah. Strong emotions can definitely cloud our judgment. Like, you're more likely to believe something if it confirms your existing fears or biases.
Makes sense.
You're not really thinking critically. You're just reacting.
Right. And if it plays into those pre-existing beliefs, you're less likely to question it.
Exactly.
Speaking of questioning things, we were talking about billionaire ownership earlier. That has to play a role in all of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay, give us an example.
This case involving Viacom, the parent company of CBS, is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah. I think I remember hearing something about that.
The article, Political Affiliations of Viacom Board, details a controversy around a report on President Bush's military record.
Wait, was this about those allegedly fake documents?
Mm-hmm.
I vaguely remember that being a huge scandal.
Exactly. And the article highlights how the political leanings of Viacom's board members, especially Sumner Redstone.
Who's Sumner Redstone?
Well, he was the big boss at Viacom.
Yeah.
And a self-proclaimed liberal Democrat, and people question whether his views impacted CBS's reporting.
So you've got this powerful figure with strong political leanings. And it makes you wonder, did those leanings influence the network's coverage? It's like, can you really be truly objective when you have so much at stake?
Right. It's tough. And the article even quotes a media watchdog group, Accuracy in Media, pointing to Redstone's political donations as potential evidence of bias.
It's a classic case of follow the money.
Right.
If someone benefits financially or politically from a certain narrative, it makes you question their motives.
Absolutely. Like, are they pushing this story because it's true or because it benefits them in some way?
Right. And it's not just limited to individual owners or CEOs, right?
Yeah.
We have to consider the whole ecosystem. Think about advertisers.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
If a news outlet relies heavily on revenue from, like, the pharmaceutical industry,
Right.
wouldn't they hesitate to publish anything negative about big pharma?
For sure. It's like biting the hand that feeds you. But that can lead to self-censorship.
Right, where journalists avoid certain topics or frame stories in a very specific way to protect their funding.
Exactly. And that's a form of bias, too. Certain voices get silenced. And certain perspectives just never even make it to the table.
So you might be getting a very skewed, very limited version of reality.
Exactly.
So what can we do about it? It feels like we're up against this massive system designed to manipulate us.
It can feel that way for sure, but we're not powerless.
Okay, give us some hope here. What can we do?
One strategy is to diversify your media diet. Don't just rely on one or two sources.
Right.
Explore a variety of outlets, both mainstream and independent. Think of it like cross-referencing your sources.
So, like, don't just read the New York Times.
Right.
Read something else, too, something different.
Exactly. Get different perspectives. You get a more complete picture that way.
It's like getting a second opinion, but for news.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. Look for viewpoints that challenge your assumptions. You might not always agree,
Right.
but it helps you see the issue from multiple angles.
It's like that saying, you can't learn anything new if you're only talking to people who agree with you.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so diversify our sources. What else?
And don't just skim the headlines. Actually read the articles, the op-eds, the in-depth reports. You might be surprised at what you discover when you dig a little deeper.
Okay, so we're not just reading headlines, we're actually doing the work.
You got to do the work.
Okay, diversify our sources, read critically. Anything else?
Another powerful tool is to support independent media.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
We talked about corporate influence, right? Well, independent outlets often have more freedom to report on issues that challenge the status quo. They rely on donations and subscriptions, so your support makes a real difference.
So put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
It's like voting with your wallet. But for journalism.
Exactly. And don't forget about local journalism. They play a crucial role in holding those in power accountable. But they've been struggling in recent years. Supporting local newspapers and radio stations helps ensure that diverse voices continue to be heard.
So we've got to support the little guys. They're the ones doing the real groundwork.
They are. They are.
But even with all these strategies, it's still tricky, right? There's still so much noise out there.
It is. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But there are ways to filter out the noise.
Okay.
One way is to become familiar with common fake news techniques. Remember that source, 6 fake news techniques?
Yeah.
They talk about things like reverse image searches,
Yeah.
checking video metadata, and being wary of manipulated statistics.
Right.
It's like becoming a digital detective. You have to learn how to sniff out the clues and separate fact from fiction.
Use our detective skills.
Exactly. And one of the simplest yet most effective strategies is to simply be aware of your own biases.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. It is. We all have them, right?
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging those biases and how they might influence our perceptions.
Ooh, that's like some next level self-awareness.
It is. It's like that saying, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool.
Ooh, that's deep.
So before you share that shocking headline or retweet that inflammatory post, take a moment to consider, what's the source? What's the agenda?
Right.
And how might my own biases be influencing my reaction?
It's like taking a deep breath before you jump into the deep end of the pool.
Exactly. Pause, reflect, and then decide.
But even with all this awareness, there's still one big elephant in the room that we need to address.
You're talking about selective reporting, right?
Yes. It's one of the most insidious forms of bias
It is.
because it's about what's not being reported.
Exactly. It's
Hey everyone, just taking a moment to send a huge shout out to all of you tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. Your support really keeps us going. And if you're enjoying the deep dives and want to help us continue bringing you these thought-provoking discussions, head over to deepdivedispatch.com. It's an awesome way to support the show and keep the conversation alive. Big thanks for being part of our community. Now, let's jump back into the next part of our episode and keep unraveling these intriguing topics. Enjoy.
like they're not outright lying. They're just choosing to highlight certain stories while ignoring others.
And that can really warp our understanding of the world, right?
Absolutely. It shapes the narrative just as effectively as any gaslighting tactic. Sneaky, sneaky. So let's explore that in more detail. What is selective reporting and how does it work? Okay, so we're back. And it feels like we've gone down this rabbit hole of media bias and all these sneaky tactics.
Yeah, we've uncovered a lot. But the question is, now what?
Right, like we know about the gaslighting, the selective reporting, the billionaire ownership, but what do we do with this information?
How do we become, like, savvy media consumers?
Yeah, like we don't want to be manipulated, right?
Exactly. Awareness is great, but action is what really matters.
Yeah.
So what are some practical steps we can take to, like, actually navigate this crazy media landscape?
Yeah, give us the tools.
Well, we touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Diversify your media diet. Don't just rely on one or two sources for your news and information. Explore different outlets, both mainstream and independent.
Right, like don't just read the New York Times, read something else too.
Exactly. Get out of your bubble. Get different perspectives. You'll get a more complete picture that way. It's like if you only eat one type of food, you're missing out on all those other nutrients.
Yeah.
You need a balanced media diet to get the full picture.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. Look for viewpoints that challenge your own assumptions and beliefs. It's in those spaces of discomfort that we can truly learn and grow.
It's like if you only hang out with people who look and think exactly like you, you're missing out on so much richness and diversity. And that goes for ideas too.
Absolutely. And when you do encounter different viewpoints, try to engage in respectful dialogue. It's not about trying to change someone's mind or win an argument.
Right.
It's about listening with an open mind and trying to understand where they're coming from.
You can disagree with someone without demonizing them. You can have a civil conversation and actually learn something from each other. And hey, maybe even change your own mind a little bit in the process.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to disagree. In fact, disagreement can be incredibly productive if it's approached constructively.
Okay, so diversify your media diet, engage in respectful dialogue. What else? What other tools do we have?
Well, we talked about supporting independent media. Remember, they often have more freedom to report on issues that challenge the status quo. They rely on donations and subscriptions, so putting your money where your mouth is can make a real difference.
Yeah, like voting with your wallet, but for journalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget about local journalism. Local newspapers and radio stations play a vital role in holding those in power accountable and informing communities about issues that directly affect them.
It's like they're the eyes and ears of our communities. They're the ones keeping tabs on what's happening.
And they need our support now more than ever.
So we've got to support the little guys. They're the ones doing the real groundwork.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so we've got all these big picture things, but what about on a more individual level? Like, what can I do right now to be a smarter media consumer?
Well, this might seem small, but it's powerful.
Right.
We need to be proactive in calling out bias and misinformation when we see it.
You mean like speaking up, not
Right.
just letting it slide?
Exactly. Now, this doesn't mean getting into heated arguments on social media, but it does mean sharing accurate information when we encounter falsehoods or distortions.
So it's like we all have a responsibility to be truth tellers.
Yeah, exactly. We can't just sit back and let the lies spread unchecked.
Right.
And remember, even small actions can make a difference. Sharing a fact check,
Yeah.
writing a letter to the editor, having a conversation with a friend or family member about media bias, these things add up.
It's like a ripple effect, right? It starts with you and then it spreads outward.
Exactly. So what have we learned today? It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it has.
I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power.
Right.
The more we understand about how the media works, the better equipped we are to navigate this complex landscape. It's not about becoming cynical or distrusting everything we see and hear.
No, it's about becoming informed and empowered. It's about developing that critical eye and asking those tough questions like who benefits from this narrative, what information might be missing, and how might my own biases be influencing my perceptions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the media is a powerful force, and it's up to us to be discerning consumers. We can't just passively absorb information. We have to engage with it critically and thoughtfully.
So it's about awareness, it's about action, and it's about using our voices to demand better from the media.
It's an ongoing process, and there will always be new challenges.
Right.
But by staying informed, staying engaged, and supporting those who are fighting for a more just and equitable media landscape, well, that's how we create real change.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much, but I think the most important thing is that we've given you, the listener, the tools to think critically and to make informed decisions about the information you consume.
Remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop questioning.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging for the truth.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. We hope you found today's episode enlightening and packed full of insight. Remember, your support keeps us diving deep into the stories that matter. So if you enjoyed the show, make sure to download and share it with others who crave a deeper understanding of politics and history. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. If there's a topic out there that you think deserves a deep dive, reach out and let us know. Your input helps us bring you the most compelling content week after week. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time on Deep Dive Dispatch. Keep exploring, folks.